Before I get started and with this panel, I wanted to just make just a quick opening comment. There is in the President's State of the Union address in January, he challenged the Vice President to go out and do a review to look at the administration and what's going on in the job market, to come up with some ideas for this administration to champion and be out front on. With that challenge, the Vice President led a task force that went out and put together this document. And I invite you to pick up one of these. There are a number of them out there on the tables out front. It's called the Ready to Work Job-Driven Training and American Opportunity. And you'll find some out there on the table, so I'd invite you all to grab some of these great information in here. Next, with me, I have Jennifer Matthews. What did I say? Jamie Matthews. I'm getting bad as some of the other guys. Jamie Matthews, who's with the United States Chamber of Commerce, and we have some guests that are joining us via video that we certainly want to get introduced as well. Let me start this way. First we have, and I think she's up on the big screen now, the Assistant Secretary for Employment and Training with the Department of Labor, Portia Wu. Can you hear us, Ms. Wu? Can you hear us?
Hear you.
You can hear us, great. Welcome to Arkansas.
Thanks.
We're glad to have you with us, and we apologize for the slight delay. Also on the line, we have Jennifer Worth. She can hear it. Can you hear it?
Hello, it's Jen Worth. I can hear you all.
Very good. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to, if you don't mind, just ask you to just make a few opening comments. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear us, and then we'll get into the dialogue of the day. So I'll just pass off to you, Jamie, if you will, to just make some opening comments.
I'd be glad to. Do I get brownie points for being here in person? My name is Jamie Matthews. I'm with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation Center for Education and Workforce. We cover the spectrum of everything from early childhood education through workforce training. I'm very glad to be with you all here today. Even though I'm on a panel to bring in the national perspective, I really truly feel that one of our great positions as being the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is we get to work with our local and state chambers of commerce. You all is where the work takes place. You all are on the ground telling us what's going on, and that is of extreme importance to us, and certainly makes our work a lot more valuable. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today to be able to talk about the Vice President's paper as well as the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and some great programs that the Chamber is doing on the national platform that will hopefully get to really engage local partners. So glad to be here.
Great, thank you very much. And next, I'm going to ask Secretary Wu, if you will, to make your opening comments. I understand that you have another event that you're going to have to get to real soon. And so at this time, I invite you to go ahead and make your opening comments. Madam Secretary.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. It's a pleasure to join you. I wanted to thank Ms. Massengale and everyone at the Delta Regional Authority. It's really fabulous work that you're doing out there, making a huge difference in the lives of millions of Americans and really helping to grow our economy and create good jobs. I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the latest things that are happening in the workforce world here in Washington. And then after that, if there's time, I'd be happy to take a couple of questions. We are getting sort of quite a bit of feedback from you all down there, so I'll do my best. I may not be able to understand, so we'll try to figure out how we can get you answers. First of all, a couple of things. It's only been a few weeks ago now that this happened, but President Obama signed the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, W-I-O-A, and that really it has very strong bipartisan support in Congress. From both parties, overwhelming support. It's really the first major legislative reform we've had of the workforce system in 15 years. On that same day, President issued a report called Ready to Work, job-driven training and American opportunity. So that is talking about how we can make sure that all of our federal investments across agencies, not just the Department of Labor, are really investing in job-driven training strategies that work. That means increased coordination between federal, state, and local resources, or transmit information for job seekers, and most importantly, directly to the hiring needs of employers. I think some people have asked together our complementary efforts. The Innovation and Opportunity Act provides a tremendous opportunity for us, and I'll talk about its highlights a little bit more. The investments in the Department of Labor and Education are not the only place we invest in workforce. All of you well know. Investments in infrastructure, in transportation, in health and human. And we want to make sure that investments are helping get workers the skills they need to fill the jobs of tomorrow, and helping employers to give employees that they are looking for. They can continue to grow their businesses. Just a couple of highlights on the Work Innovation and Opportunity Act. For workers, we hope legislation will mean some significant changes and improvements. And I should say, before I talk about it, we are on a fast timeline to implement the law, so I'll talk more about that in a minute. But they will be able to make more about what training is effective and best suited, also to get more high-quality services at American job centers, and more access to work training, which I know has also been a strong interest of employers around the country. Employers really want to see stronger connections to the workforce system and more flexibility. And we think that this legislation really provides an opportunity to have better alignment, some flexibility at the state and local level to serve the needs of employers in those areas. I would say, if people ask me sort of what do you think are the biggest changes in the new law, I would say that I think the words innovation and opportunity in its title really speak to the heart of it. It's a great opportunity for us to lean forward, make sure that a conversation about workforce isn't just about what Department of Labor is doing, but it's really also about what Department of Commerce is doing, what Department of Education is doing. How are we bringing everyone into that conversation? And I think one example of how the new law is really going to force this level of coordination is through the state unified plans that each state is going to have to put together. Those are strategic plans where the state will have to explain how work dollars, education investments, vocational rehabilitation, as well as employment services are all coming together to serve workforce needs. That plan is also supposed to explain how regional economic development will be part of a workforce strategy. So I think this is a tremendous opportunity, but of course, I won't in the details. We will be, Congress has directed us to put out draft regulations on how the law will be implemented within 6 months for law's passage. That means by mid-January. We are, the Department of Labor, working very closely with the Department of Education here in Washington. We are going to be holding a series of webinars where we will be asking for people's feedback, and those should be up on our website very shortly. We also will be holding a series of regional forums. So I know folks in your region, Les and Atlanta, will be reaching out to all of you to make sure that you have the opportunity to participate in those forums and give us your feedback. I think we really want to know what worked for you under the old law, what didn't, how we can be sure that we're encouraging practices that make sense. One thing we heard often under WIA is people, because the law didn't say something they weren't sure if you could. We think this new law really leans in on practices very promising, like sector partnerships, regional partnerships, developing career pathways, a lot of things that make a lot of sense and have proven very successful in growth industries. But we want to be sure that you know what you've done and that you're heard in developing our guidance. So please, I encourage you to participate in that process. It is going to happen over the next couple months. We will send you the link so you can look at our website. We also have a number of fact sheets on our website, and we have an email address where you can send your questions right away, so we can be sure. We won't be able to answer them all right away, but we want to hear from you and know the issues so we can ensure close relationships and alignment between workforce needs and economic development. So with that, I'll wrap it up and say thank you. I'd be happy to take a couple of questions from.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you for those comments. And we'll open it up to the floor, but I did want to follow up. And in the end, you touched on the work that you're doing with the Department of Education. I remember during the President's State of the Union address, he talked about something that has come up over and over in this group here today, and that is the role of two-year colleges in preparing the workforce for today. Can you tell me if there are some initiatives going on right now with your agency and the Department of Education to help promote the role that two-year colleges play in helping to prepare the workforce for jobs for today?
I'm not sure what the question is. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I think the question was about the role of two-year colleges and community colleges and workforce training. And absolutely, this is a critical issue. I think, as you know, through the TAA Community College and Career Training Grant, which we've been delighted to be a partner with the Delta Regional Authority on, investing in our community college system is really how we prepare the workforce for the future. That's a huge place where training and skills development is happening in this country every day. Some of it through Department of Labor funds, but a lot of it through Pell Grants or people investing their own money. So I think that absolutely has a critical role to play. As I mentioned, one of the ideas of the new law is having states have a coordinated strategy. And adult education absolutely must be part of that. But the law encourages, and we through our guidance plan encourage other critical partners. We would love to see 4-year, 2 and 4-year universities being part of that. Technical education at the high school level. Absolutely. We think it's a curriculum of learning so that starts as a young person, continue through a worker's working life. And we think that's a very important and to see post-coordination. I think it was very telling in the webinar, the call we did to thousands of workforce system folks the day after the President signed the law. It was both Secretary Perez and Secretary Duncan who led up that call. We continue to really coordinate.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Are there any questions from the floor for the Secretary before she has to leave for her next meeting? Going once? Going twice? No questions. Thank you, Madam Secretary. We appreciate you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great conference, everyone.
That's applause if you can't tell. Next, can we bring in Jennifer Worth?
Chairman Massengill, is that you?
No, you just really insulted him. No, this is Steve Jones. I'm on his board. Thank you for being with us today, along with your colleagues. Thank you all for being with us. Jennifer, at this time, we'd like for you to just make a few opening remarks, if you will, and then we'll come back to you with some questions.
All right. Well, thank you guys for having us. I want to thank the chairman as well as his team, Tanya, Spencer, everyone that we've worked with to date. It has been a real honor, and all of us here at the American Association of Community Colleges take great pleasure in trying to connect the Delta Regional Authority community colleges as a regional strategy around economic opportunities. We know you guys are talking about reimagining the workforce, and today I've actually brought two of my colleagues with me, Jim Hermes to my right, your left, and my Senior Vice President, Kathy Manis, for Workforce and Economic Development here with us. So you're getting a panel of three, and hopefully you can all see us and hear us. We know there was a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're going to try and give you a quick overview and then answer some of your questions. As just a very fast update, I have been on several trips with most of the DRA staff to several of your communities, and you'll be seeing us in each one of these regional events coming up over the next several weeks. At AACC, we really are about making sure that the federal groups are working in conjunction with those two-year institutions. We are the membership organization for all community colleges across the country. We have about 1,100 of them, but that doesn't necessarily reflect our true reach. As many of you know, in your backyards, you may have one college with multiple campuses or very flexible opportunities. There are four-year groups in the room. There are industry partners in the room. We work with all of you. We see success when we get individuals get meaningful employment and high-quality jobs with good paychecks. So that's what we're really striving for together with you. To the Secretary's point earlier, we don't just think about the traditional industry sectors. Your region geographically is really positioned in a unique place. We can talk to you about the things like transportation. We are doing a grant along the Mississippi River, which is one that the Delta Regional Authority has partnered with us on. We are doing a lot of economic development strategies related to logistics, healthcare, construction, any number of traditional trades, as well as the more progressive ones. So we're looking forward to having those conversations with you, but the colleges really are our sweet spot. So following my comments, I would actually like to turn it over to my Senior Vice President, and then I'll have my colleague who has the specific technical expertise around the recent legislation and how it relates to your communities present. So Kathy, would you like to say anything?
I just want to say it's been a privilege to be able to work with you. A lot of the colleges that we represent, some of them are very large and some of them are very small. Some of them are very urban and some are very rural. So we are particularly proud that this enables us to reach and work with colleges that sometimes don't always spotlight. Colleges that are in a lot of need and are willing to collaborate regionally. So we appreciate being here and being able to be responsive to you.
And with that, can we turn it over to Jim? He did have a number of things that the chairman asked him to go over so that you all would get an overview of the policy and the climate on the campuses. Or do you want to ask a question before we turn to that, or do you want us to just continue?
Why don't you just go ahead and Jim and share with us, and then we'll come back with the questions based on the audience's reaction.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Jim Hermes. I'm the Associate Vice President for Government Relations here at AACC. Just a couple of words following on the Assistant Secretary's comments in terms of the reauthorized Workforce Investment Act, now the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, and Innovation Opportunity Act, pardon me. We've gone from WIA to WIOHA. We're still getting used to the new acronym and the new name here. I must say, as an advocate that's been working on this piece of legislation since it was due for reauthorization and before, it seems pretty real to be talking about having finished this reauthorization after an 11-year process. All very happy. We're at the stage that the Secretary was talking about in terms of the implementation of the Act. I think the thrust for comments is really where all of us were putting our focus over the last 11 years. How do we take what I think everyone agreed was a good structure and concept in terms of bringing all the partners that are in the room today together at the state and local level, at the federal level, to work together to serve workers who need these services. Under the Workforce Investment Act, that worked well in some places, did not work well in other places, and certainly the goal that we all had in mind was to make it work better in more places, hopefully in every place, with the new act. So we came at that through a couple of different approaches. Obviously, there was a faction that wanted to achieve that end by consolidating a number of programs. And then there was others who wanted to focus more on alignment of the existing structures. What we have in terms of the end piece of legislation is one that focuses primarily on the alignment piece. While some programs were consolidated, 15 in all, most of those programs were not currently funded. So we have something that pretty closely resembles what has been moving its way through the Senate for the last several years. The Secretary talked about the unified plan. That's certainly a core element of this piece of legislation in terms of how it will hopefully make all the things that happen on the ground in terms of occupational education, adult education, vocational rehabilitation, a whole number of other things better and more seamlessly together. We think that the new and revamped performance indicators are a big part of that. The fact that they now apply across all of what are now called the core programs. And also the fact that they are focused more on allowing people to stay in longer-term training, more than those indicators used to be. Certainly the fact that great emphasis in the bill on regional planning and delivery of services. We think that that will be a great assistance for more natural economic areas together beyond the local areas that has been the focus to come together and plan on a regional basis, bringing all the key together. And a whole number of other things, primarily, the ability to co-enroll in occupational education and adult education programs. Long stumbling block for people in these services where they essentially had to pick one or the other, and it was very hard to serve people who had multiple needs. And as you know, so many of the people that are coming through your doors do have those multiple needs. You should be able to better serve them with these federal programs. The list goes on and on in terms of all the things that are in the piece of legislation. I certainly can't get into all about how the bill should help programs better align with themselves on the ground. As far as community colleges go, we had a number of priorities coming into this process, and we're happy to see that a number of them were included in the legislation. First and foremost, the much greater emphasis placed on acquisition of post-secondary credentials in the bill is one that we've been pushing for a long time. We'd like to see this program moving a bit away from a job-first mentality to the mentality of let's get people into the right jobs, into the jobs that are going to be able to support them now and into the future. Part of that also was an emphasis on career pathways that we see in the bill. Moving people into positions that they can move into now and going back and forth between work and education as they move through their careers. Concept that is now a much greater Workforce Investment Act. Schools and training providers and local areas with and one-stop centers being able to contract directly in more situations to provide training services to people in their areas. A priority for community colleges for a long time, where the individual training account or the voucher model didn't really help us to expand training capacity. So we're happy to see that in this bill. We're happy that the community colleges continue to have a place on the local workforce investment boards, and in many states also continue to have required place by virtue of being adult education providers in the state on the state workforce board as well. So a number of things that were community college priorities in this piece of legislation. Certainly a greater emphasis on training is also one of those things, as we have explicitly ended the sequence of services once and for all, which proved to be a stumbling block getting people directly into training when they needed it in many areas. There are a couple of challenges that we see with this piece of legislation as well. We would hope to have, at the end of the day, a much more streamlined approach to the amount of information that training providers are required to provide or eligible to provide WIA services and programs. The stumbling block over the years has always been wage and earnings information for non-WIA participants in our program. A lot better than it was in 1998, certainly, but it still remains a problem for institutions to get that information in some cases. And the indication is that would be much less favors in this area. So we may have a situation again where some community college programs that might otherwise be eligible won't because of the burden of the data requirements involved. Hopefully that won't be the case, and hopefully we can continue to keep improving in that area. Other thing is, and one thing I think that you would also be paying attention to is the new infrastructure scheme. So as I mentioned, the whole thrust of this program ever since the WEA was reauthorized in 1998 was to bring local partners together. Have them working together, and the mechanism that was in place to have them do that is a memorandum of understanding. That continues to be the prime mechanism for having people come together and decide how they're going to fund the infrastructure of this system. However, in areas not reaching MOU for whatever reason, there is now a new provision that has the state coming in, working out essentially what the contribution fee should be from each of the partners to fund and run that infrastructure. That's an entirely new process. Not entirely clear how that's going to work. A lot of that will depend on the regulatory and implementation phase that the Assistant Secretary was talking about. So more to watch for there, but a new facet of the program and somewhat of a question mark.
Can I jump in on that one? So I know that all of you sitting in the audience are most likely holding, and if you're not holding it, then you should be holding, a copy of the Reimagining Workforce by the Southern Growth Policy Board. If you don't have that document, it's something that I know DRA has access to. They shared it with me. But on each one of those chapters, your individual DRA state has been profiled. All of your workforce and economic development partners sort of were listed, and the constellation is likely going to be somewhere in that network of those pages. And to Jim's point, whether or not it's a formal MOU, which would be the ideal, or you guys have to structure it together in a different way, those are the places to look if you're trying to identify who are the right partners in your area. Just know there are so many of you in that room right now from a variety of different backgrounds. Knowing where to start usually is one of the biggest problems. So I would say look in your chapter, make sure that you know who the right people are, and then Jim's point, make sure you're lining them up. Sorry.
Just to wrap up, so again, there's a lot of work done in terms of the implementation phase of the process, and as before the act comes into effect, about a little less than a year from now. A few words on a couple of the other things that I think the Assistant Secretary also mentioned. The jobs-driven ready-to-work plan that was released at the same time as NOAA was signed. The end product of a multi-month review of the job training programs at the federal level led by the Vice President after the President charged him with that task in the State of the Union address. To be frank, we were a little concerned about this process because there were a lot of question marks as to why this was happening at the same time that the Workforce Investment Act was entering its final phase of the reauthorization process and had been in that process for a number of years. So people, I think, were a little concerned about how those two things would work together. I'm pretty happy to say that I think, from my point of view anyway, that they do mesh very well together. They both reflect each other in terms of the emphases that they place on certain elements of the workforce program. And what you see in the report is very reflective of what you see in the legislation. Certainly, they're putting the emphases, I think, in the right places in terms of things like, that you see on the checklist, which is at the center of the plan, and that will guide not only the work through the WIOA programs, but also through all the other federal grant programs that have a workforce development aspect to them. So things like, work to earn, better emphasis on labor market information, post-secondary credentials, all those things that we think should be part of a good workforce development team, rather intuitive, are what you see on that checklist. And I think we'll be seeing the ramifications of that in the months and years to come. And then finally, another major piece of legislation that we concentrate here on at AACC is the Perkins Career and Technical Education legislation. That is just now entering the first phase of its reauthorization process. We are very hopeful it's not going to last 11 years, but could see more action on that in the fall of this year, and certainly as things get underway next year as well. Obviously, a lot is riding on the elections in November, and especially with the role the Senate will be. That will have an influence on the process, but all signs point to a bipartisan process for reauthorization of the Perkins Act, and we are hopeful it remains that way, and if it does, that combined with the fact that there does not seem to be an appetite on the Hill for any sort of major restructuring of that bill, we should be hopefully talking about a completed reauthorization of the Perkins Act maybe this time next year. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my comments and turn it back to my colleagues to see if they have anything to add. If not, we're happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you, for a lot of what I would say is a lot of really good information, things that are going on in the two-year colleges world. And we got about 9 minutes left in this segment. I want to make sure that the audience has an opportunity to chime in, but I did want to go back to Jamie for just a moment. I know that I asked you to make some brief opening comments. I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to talk about any
I'm so sorry. This is Jen Worth. We cannot hear you. If you have the opportunity to type the question, it might be clearer for us. Or if you can speak into the computer, that would probably help us. We are not able to hear anything verbal.
Can you hear me better now? Is this better?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Better, a little bit better, but it's still not sharper.
Okay, we can try to get the questions typed in as well. And so you all can start thinking about your questions. If you want to get them to Angela in the white over here, we'll make sure that we get them typed in. But for you, Jamie, I wanted to know if there were any other national initiatives that you all are working on at the U.S. Chamber that you thought this audience ought to know about before we go and open it up for them.
Most definitely. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about some of the initiatives that we're working on at the Chamber. As a reaction to the WIOA, I think that AACC and Secretary Wu have done a great job of their overview. These programs that we're working on certainly tie into basically the Chamber's reaction to that legislation and to those programs. And what it is that we're trying to say is that these approaches that has been made through legislation, made through the administration, it's living up to a long-standing tradition of the right buzzwords. We're talking about demand-driven, we're talking about greater employer engagement in what it means to be an effective education and workforce partner. But there's one key element that we feel is missing, that we feel would present a new, more hopefully timely approach, if you will, and that's an employer-led system. So we talk about demand-driven and jobs-driven, but we really feel that the employer being at the helm of the leadership for moving forward on these agenda items could make for real substantial change.
I just have to interject. This is Jen. None of the three of us can understand you. If you're talking internally in your room, that's fine, but if you're asking us, are you guys having an internal conversation, or are you asking us to respond?
We are having internal conversations. Can you hear? Can you understand
I'm sorry,
me?
then we're going to hold off and thank you.
Can you understand me at all? Can you?
I heard you say at all.
Okay, that was important, but that wasn't the most important thing. All right, well, why don't you go ahead and finish, and then we'll see if we can figure out technology-wise what's going on up here.
Sure, happy to do that. So with our talent pipeline management approach that we're working on, we're looking at supply chain management principles and how they can be adapted to talent. Businesses have become very familiar with how to get return on investment for their education partnerships. For a long time, I think a lot of people felt very comfortable, well, if only we were to give more money, if only we were to give more money, if only we were to give more money, and yet we're still not seeing the types of changes. So businesses have become smarter partners to say, okay, I need to look at outcome measurements, I need to get a better return on my investment. It's how you run a business, it's how you run an effective business. So why wouldn't we do the same when we're looking at how to have effective talent pipeline management? So what I mean by that is if you can think of, let's say, a small to medium-sized enterprise, maybe a manufacturer, who for quite some time time has been going to the spot market to try to make fixes within their organization. So maybe that's hiring consultants, maybe that's giving current employees overtime, but long-term, that's not a sustainable solution. So what they need to be thinking about is how do we leverage our partnerships with our education providers to make sure that we do have long-term sustainable employment coming through. So as an employer, if I can identify some of my top-tier providers of students who come out of programs that really do something in my business, that is going to eliminate greatly the time to full productivity, the time to higher earnings for students, so that they can start to engage more fully in this pathway pipeline. So that's kind of how we start to see things, is how do we improve the transition for students? How do we improve that transition on the employer side? The way to do that is to have employers at the helm. We've seen some organizations do this. Some companies have figured this out. I think that people use Boeing as an example, but we're not all Boeing. So we have to figure out how to make that a scalable solution, and we really believe that applying supply chain principles, learning from value networks, trying to make sure that we have that focus on outcomes, and empowering employers to be more effective partners. A lot is asked of employers. We know that. We're the chamber, so we hear from employers all the time that that's the case. So it's really making sure that those partnerships are as effective as possible. So I'm happy to go into further detail, but I know we want to open it up to questions.
Very good. Thank you. While they check and make sure that they can understand us, are there any questions from the audience at this time on this? I know they've been real thorough, but there's got to be some questions out there. Yes, sir.
If you can go into a little bit greater detail on what you mean about using supply chain principles in
Sure.
relationship to the pipeline.
Sure. So I think that people sometimes get a little scared when we start to talk about thinking of people like services and products. But if you think of how an organization is operated in terms of designing products, producing products, all that goes into it, how human resources plays into getting the ultimate end goal. It's very strategic from the business perspective. They know exactly what they're doing to be able to service their end customer. So if we think of education provision as the end customer, as the employer, then you start to see how to connect those dots. So if you're thinking of, for instance, I'll use Boeing as an example because they are such a great example. Boeing has created a number of partnerships with specific universities, and they've created a feedback mechanism to be able to go back to those providers to say, I am able to collect data to see what happens to the students that graduate from that specific program who come into my organization. I know exactly how much time it takes them to train on the job. I know exactly how much time it takes for me to be able to elevate them to the next level of training. I know how long it takes for me to be able to then promote them, and how long I'm able to retain those people. Yeah. So if I'm Boeing, then obviously I'm going to be looking at which of those providers are giving me the most students that are doing that. So I can identify who my tier 1 supplier is, and then I want to do more business with them. So I think that when the earlier panel was talking about, academia kind of coming and starting to move faster and faster, and the woman made the good point that we need resources to do that. Boeing has had employees go to schools to serve as faculty members. They have allowed schools to use their resources at their various training facilities. Those are ways that we can create more effective partnerships. We just need a lot more of them. And of course, important to us at the Chamber is because we do have so many small to medium-sized businesses, we want to make sure that they're not left out in the conversation. They don't feel as empowered to have that kind of leveraging tool to say, oh, well, come use my facilities, come do what you need. So what we're starting to try to help people understand is that in supply chain management, there's a value network. So perhaps you're not producing the exact same product, but there are similarities in terms of training that can take place to make you be more effective as a collaborative. Of course, there's competition that's involved in that, but if you really think about the long-term investment of resources, the competitive edge that all of those partners in the value network have really are insurmountable to what you would do if you're just comparing, okay, well, I'm going to try to hire this person before you do. Does that help?
Thank you. I think we have time for about one more question. Anybody else got a burning question? Well, let me thank you, Jamie, for being here today.
Sure, thank you for having. I love Arkansas. It's my first time.
Oh, really? Well, you have to come back often.
I will do that. Thank you.
And also certainly want to thank the Secretary as well as those individuals from the U.S. Chamber, and thank you all for participating in this panel. When you talk about, you know, the role of the federal policies and what's going on, it's good, I think, that when business and when education is all tied in together, listening and talking and communicating with each other, then are you really responding? If you want to talk about more of a systematic approach, you're really responding to the needs of the job market. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your comments. And as a token, because you thought enough to come, I'm just kidding. We want to make this presentation to you on behalf of the Delta Regional Authority. It's a challenge coin. You see these in the military. It's just like this little pin that I'm wearing here, but it's a bigger version of it, and I hope that you will keep this and you'll have good thoughts about the Delta Regional Authority and talk about us well when you go around.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.